On September 26, 1983, at exactly 12:14 a.m., the world as we know it almost ended. Inside a secret bunker known as Serpukhov 15, south of Moscow, a massive electronic map suddenly flashed a single word in blood-red Russian text: Start. The Soviet Union's billion-dollar satellite system had just detected a nuclear missile launch from the United States. The man sitting in the command chair was Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov. His pulse didn't just quicken, it froze. He had been trained for this for years. His orders were absolute. Report the launch to the Kremlin immediately. If he did, the Soviet leadership would launch a massive retaliatory strike. Within an hour, every major city in America, Europe, and Russia would be a radioactive crater. But Petrov didn't pick up the phone. He sat in the red glow of the alarms and waited. This is the story of the most dangerous 20 minutes in human history, and the man who chose to disobey orders to save the human race. To understand why Petrov's decision was so terrifying, you have to understand the world in 1983. Tension between the U.S. and the USSR was at a breaking point. Only 3 weeks earlier, the Soviets had shot down a Korean civilian airliner, KAL-007, killing 269 people. President Ronald Reagan had recently called the Soviet Union an evil empire. Both sides were on a hair trigger. The Soviet leadership was genuinely convinced that the U.S. was planning a first-strike nuclear surprise. Petrov wasn't even supposed to be working that night. He was filling in for another officer who had called in sick. He was an analyst, a man who understood the systems better than anyone. When the alarm hit, the bunker's computer reliability was at its highest level. The machine was telling him, with 100% certainty, the Americans are coming. Petrov stared at the screen. 1 missile. Then the computer bleeped again. 2, 3, 4. The system was reporting 5 Minuteman ICBMs heading straight for Soviet soil. Petrov had his subordinates screaming at him. What do? We have to report. But Petrov's mind was racing through the logic. He thought to himself, if the Americans were going to start World War III, would they really only send 5 missiles? He knew that a first strike meant to decapitate a superpower would involve hundreds, even thousands of warheads to ensure no retaliation was possible. 5 missiles felt like a mistake. But the computer was screaming. The ground-based radar hadn't picked them up yet because the missiles were still over the horizon. He had 15 minutes left before impact. If he waited for radar confirmation and he was wrong, his country would be destroyed without a fight. If he reported it now and he was wrong, he would be the man who started the apocalypse. Petrov made his choice. He picked up the phone and called the duty officer at the Soviet Army's headquarters. But he didn't report a launch. He said, "I am reporting a system malfunction." He lied. He didn't know it was a malfunction. He was guessing. He stood there, surrounded by his crew, watching the giant screen. They waited for the flashes of light that would signify the end of the world. 5 minutes passed. 10, 12. The sirens continued to wail. Petrov held on to the back of his chair, so hard his knuckles turned white. He looked at the clock. If the missiles were real, they would be hitting Moscow right about now. Nothing happened. Moscow was silent. The world kept spinning. Later, an investigation found the culprit. It wasn't a secret U.S. attack. It was the sun. A rare celestial alignment had caused sunlight to reflect off the top of high-altitude clouds in North Dakota at just the right angle to trick the Soviet satellite's infrared sensors. To a billion-dollar machine, a sunbeam looked exactly like a rocket engine. You would think Petrov was hailed as a hero. He wasn't. The Soviet military didn't want to admit their perfect system had failed. Petrov was interrogated, reprimanded for not keeping his logbook properly during the crisis, and eventually pushed into early retirement. He lived in a tiny apartment on a meager pension, known only to his neighbors as a quiet old man. It wasn't until the 1990s, after the fall of the USSR, that his story was finally told. Petrov passed away in 2017. He never considered himself a hero. He once said, "I was just doing my job." But on a night when technology failed and the world was minutes from fire, Stanislav Petrov's job was to be the human being who said no. This is Q History. We are alive today because of one man's gut feeling. If you think the world needs to remember Stanislav Petrov, share this video and subscribe. Who else is history hiding? Let us know in the comments.